Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Well, the cons have finally found East Palestine, Ohio on the map. And gun fetish Barbie, Lauren Boebert tweeted out that Pete Buttigieg finally emerged today. Not a single comment about the train crash in Ohio. Instead, he bemoaned the whiteness of the construction industry. It's a miracle this country is able to function under this regime. And look, here's the weird thing. The outrage machine on the right has finally found out, hey, there was something going on over there. Hey, some big giant plumes of smoke and stuff. Lots of it. And again, it's interesting that the people who are responsible for this, in my view, are the ones who were silent the entire time until now the outrage machine goes, oh, Pete Buttigieg didn't mention it. Now let's attack Buttigieg and Biden and all of them. And look, there's a lot of attacks to go around. Now, it's interesting. While she's attacking the guy who's the head of the Department of Transportation, didn't mention the fact that the guy who was the congressional representative in that area, Republican Bill Johnson, chair of the House Committee on the Subcommittee on Environment, Manufacturing, and Critical Materials, environment kind of there, not a peep until the outrage machine said, hey, over here. And a couple hours ago, finally, a miraculous statement, and going to be on with the Hannitys, and now he's got his shot. This is his shot to be somebody. Now he does say something. And the thing is, I've been asking why this hasn't been front page news for the last week. Well, since it happened, 5 giant cars carrying 40,000 gallons of this vinyl chloride. This is honestly, this is one of the largest ecological disasters in this country's history. I mean, this is they're saying it's being reported that 100,000 gallons of this stuff, or 1 million pounds of this vinyl chloride, has either been leaked, spilled, or burned. And there are people in the area reporting their cars and their houses and everything covered with acid rain and phosgene and all this stuff that, not great for you. Not good for you. In fact, I looked up phosgene. Phosgene is a poisonous gas. So if you're breathing this stuff in, not good for you. And you look at the pictures of the people, the cleanup crew, I'm not seeing the kind of safety precautions that I would like to see. Now, the hydrogen chloride that comes out of this, because it's been reported that obviously this burning of this stuff and all this stuff produces hydrogen chloride, not good for the nose, skin, eyes, throat, larynx, all that stuff. It's kind of bad for you. All of it bad for you. And no reporting. And yet last week you had a guy, I think it was Wednesday, a reporter had the audacity to ask a question during the DeWine press conference. They arrested him for the crime of, speaking while the DeWine was speaking. And there's been no real attention. And we've been talking about it. Last week we had Jared Cassidy on from the Smart Union saying, hey, what's going on there? Finally. And again, the outrage machine, this isn't about finding out what went wrong. This isn't about helping the people on the ground. This isn't about making sure it doesn't happen again. This is about just outrage. This is about being mad at Pete Buttigieg. Now, I find it interesting that the mayor of the town, a guy named Trent Conaway, he's been quoted as saying, this isn't going to get swept under the rug. Not going to happen. I'm not going to be the country bumpkin that gets talked over by a big corporation. We're going to hold their feet to the fire. They're going to do what they say they're going to do, and they're going to protect the people of this town. No, they're not. I think the last person in the room who knows that, no, they're not. Because, again, this wasn't allowed to get out. This wasn't front page news everywhere. This wasn't the story of our... We were too busy talking about stoves and balloons. I actually, someone actually, tweeted, Joe Biden issued an executive order to derail the train to get us off of talking about balloons. I mean, that's how crazy things have gotten. And the thing that bothers me is when you throw out a comment of going, "Hey, this is wrong. We should be dealing with the situation." It immediately, especially on the right, becomes, "Well, you're blaming Donald Trump for this." And you go, "No, there's blame there." During the Trump years, he did roll back a lot of regulations on this industry. This is the central tenet of conservative ideology. This is what the Republicans have been fighting for decades. This idea that you're going to allow corporate America to self-police themselves. This idea that corporate America will do what's in their best interest, and that will then protect from the rest of us. No, that's not how it happens. They do what's in their best interest, their bottom line best interest, because they know we're never going to hold them accountable. Right now, as we speak, it's being reported that the railroad, Norfolk Southern, is out there. How did they put it? Was it offering $1,000 inconvenience fee checks to all of the residents that they can get a hold of? They're offering, here's a little bit of money to help you get through this. Now, of course, you have to know, anytime they're offering you something like this up front, it's going to come with a clause that you're not going to sign on to a class action lawsuit. You're not going to sue them for big money, that there's going to be some liability shields down the road. You know this is how they work. And again, I go back to Trent Conaway's comments. I'm not going to be the country bumpkin that gets rolled over. This is a high poverty area where people are going to jump at this $1,000 because they desperately need it. I don't see anybody going in there going, "Hey, we need to set up all kinds of abilities for people to stay the hell away from their homes and make sure that they're made whole through the wages that they lose." None of that. I'm sorry, not seeing it. Where's Lauren Boebert? Where's Bill Johnson? Where are the rest of these Republicans who represent these rural areas who are going to get screwed over in this? And that's not even talking about the workers in this. But again, I got taken to task of, "You're just blaming Republicans and Donald Trump." And you go, yeah, there's a lot of blame here. There's a lot of blame for Republicans, Trump, and conservative corporate Democrats. There is a lot of blame here that allowed this industry to monopolize, that has privatized, profitized, and silenced the voice of we the people in all of this. And I keep coming back to, it's the belief, it's the ideology. If you can blame anything, and again, we don't know what happened yet. We will get an NTSB report, and we've reached out to our friends over at the BLET, who fortunately sit on that board, and will, when the report comes out, they will come tell us exactly what it is. But I can tell you already what I think it is. It's the fact that this industry has moved to this precision scheduled railroading, which means, in short, slashing employees, cutting safety, cutting corners, and seeking the most profitable ways to line their pockets. Cut your way to profits. An industry that had thousands, tens of thousands more workers back when it had thousands fewer cars. We see the report. For miles, this train was evidently on fire. An axle looked like it was on fire. This is what's being reported. And, the sad reality is when you have a 30% cut in the workforce over the last couple of decades, when you have the kind of rush inspections, when you have the kind of waiver system, again, deregulating to the point where corporate America will take care of it. Don't worry, they can police themselves. They'll do what's in their best interest. When bad things happen, are you surprised? And look, it is common that axles heat up. It is common. It's common that axles fail. It's rare that an axle being on fire would cause it to derail. I understand that from the beginning. But here's the thing. This is one of those really weird kind of moments. Even while this thing was on fire, evidently these trains, the tracks have these end of train fail devices. What used to be known as cabooses, that had people in them that were monitoring things and making sure that, I don't know, that the flames aren't shooting out of the side of the train. These things fail almost every time. Almost every trip they fail at some point. And the other beautiful part of this, there's no regulation on these. These aren't mandated. They're not regulated. No one's overseeing it. So who knows if they're even on? It's like one of those cute little boxes that has a camera in it that doesn't have a wire leading out of it, that no one knows if it's actually working. This is kind of that. They go, look, we've got the thing. It's like the cleanup after 9/11. They had all those red lights all around the pit that were supposed to go off when the air quality reached a certain level that weren't actually wired up. So all of those people who thought, hey, the lights aren't on, the air quality must be okay, I can breathe in this crap. Sorry. Now, again, I go back to this. For me, the main parts of this are very simple. It's the monopolization. We've got these companies get too big and too powerful and unaccountable. Their lobbying arms are extremely powerful because they've been able to hold off regulations for decades. During the Obama term, they wanted to put a different braking system on the. Remember when the oil trains were blowing up all the time or derailing? They wanted a different braking system. They wanted to upgrade that with new technology, not Civil War era technology, something new. And the first thing the Trump administration did when they came in, wiped it all away. It's this hatred of regulation, of oversight, that's caused part of this. Now, as I was talking to people who are in the industry today, I said, what are the big problems? And I said, everyone agreed. It's the waivers. The railroads are giving these regulatory waivers all the time. For instance, if every car is supposed to be, let's just say, a car is supposed to be inspected every 1,000 miles, or every 5,000, or whatever that number is. The railroad goes, well, we didn't get around to it. Give us a waiver to double or triple. We'll get it next time around. And evidently, these things are coming fast and furious. They own the regulatory body because there's a swinging door between what little regulation there is and the industry. And this is, again, another one of these problems that we've allowed to spring up around us. That in the mild, minor regulations that we do have, there's a swinging door between the industry and the overseers. That has to stop. And as one person told me today, there's this guy, Carl Alexei. He's a Trump appointee who is responsible for all these waivers. And it's basically just pencil whip. Whatever the industry wants, the industry gets. Because, hey, it's bad on business to hold them accountable. It's bad on business to make them do the things that need to be done. And as one person reminded me, it's not about customer service in the rail industry. It's about these metrics that they throw out that the owners of the companies want. It's the bean counters hitting their metrics, hitting their goals. That makes the owners, that makes them happy. And you go, well, who are the owners? Well, everyone today was going, Warren Buffett owns all the railroads. No, he doesn't. He owns BNSF. This was Norfolk Southern. BNSF is out on the West Coast. This is Norfolk Southern. When you fall down into the rabbit hole to see who owns Norfolk Southern, it's a web of private equity groups who are unaccountable to you or me, with lobbying dollars that are just enormous. So again, you look at these disasters, you look at this and you go, who are they going to hold accountable? I go back to the mayor. Who are you going to hold accountable, mayor? Nobody. Because they're shielded from liability and they own a political party and a half. What are you going to do? This is one of those moments where, look, am I happy with how Buttigieg has handled things? No. Do I understand you've got to clean it up before you can find out what happened? Yeah. Should there be much more being done? Yes. But again, this comes back down to how little media coverage this has gotten and how it's not the sexy stuff. We were too busy focused on a woman walking around Congress with a balloon, looking like a furry in her coat. We're too busy listening to the Boberts of the world who are throwing bombs. Instead of going, hey, how do we have a government oversight system that ensures that communities and workers and citizens are safe? So at the end of this, we're going to get some mealy mouth kind of jumbled response out of this. And I said at the very day it happened, I said eventually they're going to try and blame the worker for this, the engineer. They're going to try and blame them for this. But what's really at stake here, what really, in my view, is the problem here, the fact that we've allowed these railroads to consolidate from 40 in the 80s down to 6 today, that we've allowed them to gut employment to the point to where they're talking about wanting just one person on a train that's 5 miles long, and on a training setup that they want to cut from 16 weeks or 18 weeks down to 6. There's nothing good with saying, here, corporate America, police yourself. It's kind of like, to be honest, it's kind of like saying, here, Rick, have a radar gun. I want you to track speeders, and you're going to have the only radar gun. And giving me a car that'll do 200 miles an hour down the road. What are you going to do? I'm going to do 200 miles an hour down the road because I've got the only radar gun. Same scenario here. They know there's nobody watching. And the ones that are, they know they own. So, Mayor, I wish you the best. I hope you do hold these people accountable. I hope they don't run over another country bumpkin. But I got to tell you, doesn't look good for you. Doesn't look good at all. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back.
Phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments. And you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the Super Bowl on Sunday was entertaining. I enjoyed watching the game. A little disappointed in the ending. I didn't see a holding call. Didn't see it. And I know they got the guy who they called it on to say, I'm not buying it. That could have been a much more exciting ending to a game than what it was. But it was interesting. But for me, the moment that caught my attention, and look, it was a fun game. Had a wonderful day. Had some incredible food. My wife made just a beautiful spread in best wings she's ever made. Fabulous stuff. But there was a shot where they went from the game up to the boxes to look at the celebrities. You got to see you got to see LeBron, you got to see Bradley Cooper, you got to see a whole bunch of people. Because evidently we want to know that our rich and famous are watching football like the rest of us. But they panned over to Elon Musk because, of course, why not? Why not? If he's there, you got to point it out. But he was sitting there with Rupert Murdoch. And it's one of those moments where, my mind goes into these really, really, interesting places. My mother always used to say, you're judged by the company you keep. Because I had some friends she didn't like. And, she was right. Oddly enough, as I tell my kids the exact same thing now. Interesting how that stuff plays out. But, I'm looking at Musk and Murdoch sitting next to each other. Now, you'd go, well, what's the big deal about that, Rick? Well, the big deal about that is Musk bought Twitter under the idea that he was going to open it up and he was going to make it more transparent And he was going to do all these wonderful things about democracy and free speech and all this stuff. And yet, interestingly enough, all we really see him do is attack people that he considers the left, or people that he considers, not in line with his thinking. Twitter was a space where left voices had a little bit more power than the right. It's true, mostly because the right abandoned it, because they couldn't play by the rules. And this is what the right does masterfully. If you watched the hearings, listen to Lauren Boebert and her clan going on about how she was shadow banned. She wasn't shadow banned. She violated the rules. They banned her. And then she got out of Twitter jail and came back and did it again. And this is what the right did all the time. So as they weren't following the rules, they were complaining, they're silencing us, playing the victim. Oh, nobody plays the victim like a conservative. Oh, especially a religious zealot conservative. Nobody plays the martyr like that. But to see Murdoch and Musk sitting next to each other, you go, if you're Musk and you're Musk's handlers or your PR people, why would you want that image of, the hero of the right-wing machine being seated next to your guy who's the champion of free speech and the champion of transparency? Why would you want to see, would you do that? Now, look, I've always said, he bought Twitter specifically to destroy what was only a very small advantage for the quote-unquote left, or for democratic voices. And congratulations, he has done that. But you can't now, or again, my favorite, his ego is the other part of this. Fires his engineer because his impressions went down. I mean, wow. I mean, that's one of those wow moments. But again, this idea that the right keeps throwing, this victimization, they're stealing my free speech. And I had someone say, well, what if Elon Musk, blocked you? I go, he has a couple of times. They have blocked us. They have all of our stuff is up. Our impressions are through the roof. All this stuff, but the engagement, the mentions, all that stuff, all down. It's because of the way they've changed their algorithms. And this is how you manipulate the system to get the results you want. And this is what Twitter has done, and all social media companies have done. But it's not a free speech issue. Because understand, free speech is between you and your government. Now, they are trying to say that there was collusion between the U.S. government and Twitter to silence your voices. And that the stat I love, and I forget what idiot said it, but the stat I love is that, if people on Twitter would have known about Hunter Biden's laptop, 53% of people who voted, 53% would have changed their vote. I'm going, I don't know what orifice you pulled that out of. It was the Twitter files, Rick. Yeah, I know. I don't know what orifice they pulled that out of. I have a pretty good guess. But to think about, there are 53% of the people on Twitter in this country. But somehow it was going to change 53% of the vote. Again, that victim card. Oh, they're so good at it. But the thing is they now have the power of committees. And this is all we're going to hear. We're going to hear, oh, poor, pitiful me, over and over and over. And where's Warren Zevon when we need him to at least make it somewhat entertaining? Because so far, it's the clown show we expected, without the entertainment. It's bread and circus without the bread or the circus. It's just sad. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day Indiana Governor M. Clifford Townsend dispatched state National Guard troops to Anderson, Indiana. The national strike against GM had just ended in victory for the Union 2 days earlier. UAW forces were emboldened by the militancy, solidarity, and public support for the Union in Flint. But Anderson was a company town. It was home to GM's Guide Lamp and Delco Remy divisions. GM employed 11,000 of the town's 40,000 residents. Guide Lamp workers struck in late December, and the Delco Remy plants closed to prevent sit-downs. Foremen visited workers in their homes demanding signatures for back-to-work petitions. The Citizens League for Industrial Security whipped almost half the town into an anti-union frenzy. The entire month of January was so marred by anti-union violence and intimidation, the strike had to be abandoned. When the national strike ended, the UAW organized a victory meeting. It was held virtually under siege by an anti-union mob. Victor Ruther recalled that he aged 10 years that night. Anti-union violence broke out the next evening at the Gold Band Tavern. The bar owner shot and wounded at least 10 UAW members. Union backup headed to Anderson. Fearing UAW forces, the Indiana National Guard was deployed and Madison County was placed under martial law for 10 days. In his classic History of the Flint sit-down strike, Sidney Fine explains that anti-union sentiment began to break down once workers learned GM had been forced to eliminate incentive pay. The union newspaper proclaimed, quote, "The men and women who fought on the picket line, who withstood the terror of the vigilantes, who kept the faith under trying conditions, these people changed the conditions in the shops."
Please be my Valentine. That is not only a warm, sweet, sometimes romantic sentiment people express in mid-February on frilly red cards. It's also the name of a 3rd century saint who literally lost his head, a 9th century pope whose reign lasted only 40 days, 3 Roman emperors, a very good Mexican hot sauce, and a tiny town in Texas. That town has a genuinely sweet story to tell and a unique role to play in the sending of thousands of Valentine's Day sentiments to people around the world. Valentine, Texas, population 217, was founded by the Southern Pacific Railroad in the 1880s and reportedly was named for one of the corporation's big shareholders. Nothing romantic about that. But in recent years, would-be Cupids have turned the town's name and, believe it or not, its one-room post office into a center of affectionate expression. What happened is that romantics from distant places began to batch up their pre-addressed stamped valentines and zip them to this postal outpost way out on the Texas-Mexico border. Why? Because to give their sentimental missives extra oomph, they wanted them to bear the special touch of being mailed from an actual place named Valentine. The greatest thing about our public postal workers is that they literally deliver, and the Valentine branch goes the extra mile to provide this loving gesture at no extra charge. Ismelda Ornelas, postmaster of the 79854 office, hand stamps each envelope herself. Indeed, the Valentine Post Office is now officially designated the Love Station. Moreover, the local school district holds an annual art contest among students to design each year's Valentine postmark, which is then stamped on each envelope. This is Jim Hightower saying, see, while the media tells us our world is going to hell, here's another grassroots example of loving, creative people going the other way. Happy Valentine's Day.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So today the president put out a nice little infographic about the bridges that they're going to be working on. And I've been over all of those. The Golden Gate Bridge, the one down in Louisiana, that big one, I-10, the one in Kentucky. Lots of these bridges. I mean, we've got, what was the last statistic? 46,000 structurally deficient bridges in this country. 46,000. One of the things that I had said for years, back in 2012, Republicans in the House here in Pennsylvania, they voted on a resolution to make 2012 the year of the Bible. And I was like, I don't disagree with that. I mean, there are a lot of people praying. This is 2012. I mean, we're talking over a decade ago. I said, I don't disagree with that. A lot of people are praying. They're praying that they're going to get from one side of the bridge to the other without it collapsing. And are you surprised? The answer is no. We haven't done anything really since. And look, during the Obama years, there was lots of talk about shovel-ready projects, and they did some. But finally, you've got an administration that got a big piece of legislation, a historic piece of legislation moved that's going to help fix some of these. Again, not all of them. We have 46,000 structurally deficient bridges. some of them over 50 years old. And you go, some of them need some upgrades, need some repairs, some looking into. And it's interesting to me to watch as it's rare that I get into the comments, but I saw the president's post and I go, let's see what people are saying. Let's see what the troll machine is throwing out. And it's interesting that the folks on the right think that, our infrastructure is perfect, that it's a waste of money, that we shouldn't be spending money on infrastructure. A very bizarre kind of world we're in that it comes down to who's in office. Now, I go back to, I had someone ask me about Trump, and I said, it was one of the things that I agreed with on Trump. I agreed that, infrastructure, I agreed manufacturing, I agreed China, I agreed with Trump on some major issues that were an opportunity, and I think Democrats would have come along had they had a plan. I remember every week was infrastructure week, and there was always some display at the White House, some pomp and circumstance, some photo op, him playing with trucks or shovels or out in the backyard with bricks or whatever. But no policy, no legislation, no movement. And I said, look, again, I agreed with him on these things. This is how politics are supposed to work. The things we agree on, we move on. It's interesting to me that we didn't get as many Republicans to sign on to that infrastructure legislation as I would hope. It's incredible to me. And it comes down to policy after policy. There are places where the right and the left can come together and agree on things. Back when the Tea Party sprung up, I was telling my labor friends, you've got to get involved in this Tea Party movement because the underlying current of what they're screaming about is right. It's your message. Trump basically took Bernie Sanders' message and added a little sprinkle of this, a little sprinkle of hatred, a little sprinkle of misogyny, a little sprinkle of grab her by the you-know-what, and made it his own. But that was labor's message for years. Infrastructure, manufacturing, China, all of that stuff, bad trade deals. All of that was in their wheelhouse. So there was an opportunity to come together and use that moment to solve some real problems for working people. But again, we're not allowed to solve real problems for working people. It's those problems that keep us exploitable. It's those problems that keep us at each other instead of at the very wealthy, getting the pitchforks going after the very wealthy. And the wealthy understand this. They understand as long as we're fighting over balloons, as long as we're fighting over stove troopers, as long as we're pointing fingers at each other and going, yo, 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 we're not looking at them. So I see that there's a trade agreement, a trade deal that may be coming down the pike. The Indo-Pacific Economic Framework trade deal, the IPEF, they are calling it. And I'll tell you, when these trade deals pop up, I'm always looking at them with a jaundiced eye. I'm always looking at them sideways going, yeah, the last ones haven't worked out very well. Now, I do understand that we do need to figure out how to come together on trade issues. We do need to figure out some mechanisms for things to actually be traded instead of just buying cheap stuff from overseas and shipping it back in here. There've got to be some things where we say there are baselines. And also, again, China has done something masterful. They have basically, in the 4 years that Trump did not play in the international sphere, the Chinese filled the void. They bought up minerals across the globe. They bought up governments across the globe. They bought systems across the globe. They've invested in places where we didn't. And it's going to be a little bit more interesting. These trade deals, like it or not, are how we used to do diplomacy. George Carlin always did a funny bit on Vietnam. You know why we're there in Vietnam. And you go, nobody was supposed to know. He goes, to free those people and give them industry, U.S. industry, because those are the middle letters of the word industry, U.S. And he wasn't wrong. He wasn't wrong that we were just going around the world looking for exploitable, cheap labor and have been doing it for decades. So when I look at this, I go, is this more of that? Or is this an opportunity to raise standards? Is this an opportunity to ensure that the products that we use, whether it's cell phones or T-shirts, aren't made by child labor or slave labor? To ensure that we don't have environments where the reason corporate America goes there is because they can dump all over our environment, without the care of causing any undue harm to their bottom line. There's a lot here. And, the idea being that I'll be honest, I'm not thrilled that Democrats are part of this. I'm not thrilled that Republicans are part of it. I wish working people were at the heart of this. I had someone remind me today that, Joe Biden was, part of the whole push to NAFTA and how Donald Trump was against NAFTA. And I'm going, I don't know how he was back during in the 90s. I don't know what his position was. And I don't think he did. In fact, all I know is he made a lot of ties and a lot of stuff in China. If you ever watched the David Letterman video, yeah, right there. But my problem is Democrats, to a part, have been just as bad on trade as Republicans. Am I hopeful that Joe Biden has seen the light and pushing back on some of the neoliberalism that hasn't worked over the last 40 years, pushing back on the supply side voodoo Reaganomic and moving us maybe in a direction that's going to open up trade lanes and make lives better on both sides of the border? We'll see. I'm hopeful. But I was reminded today that it was Donald Trump that got rid of the investor-state dispute settlement in NAFTA. And I said, yeah, that is a great thing. And why did that happen? That happened because the labor movement fought heavily for it. They fought heavily for getting included in this agreement because of Democratic votes. An increased minimum wage on auto workers in Mexico, the right to unionize in Mexico. They got a lot of things in there that, honestly, no Republican would have ever stood for. So in that vein, Trump did something right. And it was because you had a labor movement using the Democrats to push the agenda of working people. So I'm looking at this moment and I'm going, is there a way that we can ensure that there are protections in place, that we don't deal with trade agreements with countries that still allow union assassinations? Like Colombia. We've got a trade agreement with Colombia where they literally take trade unionists up in planes and throw them out. Where there have been stories over the years of trade unionists being shot in the head, pulled off buses and being shot in the head. You can't have trade deals with those people. And if you do, there's got to be a mechanism to hold someone accountable. We can't deal with countries that are heavily into human trafficking and forced labor and child labor and all of that stuff. So as I understand right now, there's a push to get the Biden administration to sign on to some certain things that are going to make sure that we get those labor rights. We get environmental rights. We help use this as a driver to deal with climate change, to deal with digital trade and the future issues that are coming up. Digital trade is a huge thing. There's no real framework on what that looks like. So I'm at this moment where the hope is with Biden, who is, in my view, still the most pro-union president in my lifetime, that this is going to be front and center. That ensuring that American workers are protected, that provisions for Buy American are allowed, or for domestic, I shouldn't say Buy American, I should say domestic production for domestic consumption. Because I don't really care if the UK or Germany or anyone, if you're buying stuff to use in your government, to use in your procurement, it should be made in your backyard. I think we need to move back to an era where this idea of open trade borders, meaning we're gonna have one country manufacture all of our stuff, and hopefully it'll be cheap, and we'll exploit labor there, and then we can all live. I think we have to go back to the idea of domestic production for domestic consumption, where we start making the stuff we need. We haven't thought that way in a long time. I know that's old school. That's our grandparents' generation. Yeah, and look how well they did. So we'll see. I'm anxious. I'm interested. I'm guardedly optimistic, but also concerned because another one of these trade deals could be the undoing of working people, and that's part of the worry. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. What labor union would you say has the coolest name? The Sons of Vulcan would most certainly have to be in the running. And on this day in labor history, the year was 1865. That was the day the Sons of Vulcan ended their 8-month strike and won a union contract. The Vulcans were skilled steelworkers. Many were immigrants from England, Scotland, and Wales. They worked at puddling, the process by which carbon was burnt off of molten iron in order to form steel. It was tough work that required physical strength, skill, and experience. The Vulcans first formed in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1858. A skilled trade union, only puddlers were eligible to join. They called their locals forges. They took their name, Vulcan, from the Roman god of fire and volcanoes. With the ongoing Civil War, the demand for steel grew. The work of the Vulcans was vital to the Union's war effort. But as the Civil War drew to a close, puddlers' wages were threatened. The Vulcans declared a national strike. The strike wore on for 8 months. Finally, the industry leaders agreed to the workers' demands. The Vulcans won wage increases tied to industry profits as well as union recognition. With this victory, the Vulcans' membership grew. By 1873, the number of Vulcans had topped 3,000 members. Unfortunately, that year saw a major economic panic sweep across the United States. The economic crisis took a toll on union membership. Another downfall of the union was their policy not to admit black members. This meant that employers could hire black labor in an effort to undermine the union. By 1876, the Vulcans had merged with other steel unions to form the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
They love the children. They love the children. Care about the children. Care about the children an awful lot. In fact, they care about the children so much out there in Wyoming, they're going to make sure that they can get married whenever they want. Evidently, the Republican Party is seeking to kill a bill that evidently was working its way through the state legislature that would have raised the state's minimum age to get married to a whopping age of 16. Their argument is, well, you know, if you put an arbitrary age on something, it's gonna interfere on parental rights and religious liberty. Seriously? That's the argument? And yeah, that's the argument. Everything's going to come back to parental rights and religious liberty. Everything. You know, Nazi homeschooling, parents' rights, religious liberty. Allowing 12-year-olds to marry who knows. It's insane. But it's religious liberty. And eventually we're going to get to that point. And I've always said that the fight over making this a Christian country is going to be interesting once we've staked the flag in the ground. You've got the dove flag out there next to the American flag. And we're solidly Christian country. The fun will be once the religious sects begin eating each other. And then we'll see just how bizarre these folks really are. Now, look, I've said this before, and I know my religious friends are going to, you're talking bad about religion. No, I'm not talking about the sane, rational people who are good, decent, honest people. I'm talking about these crazy people. I'm talking about people who go, no, we can't have this onerous law that says a 16-year-old can't get married without, it's insane. It's literally nuts. But there you have it. Now, it doesn't stop there. And look, in this country, the move, unfortunately, seems to be putting women, mostly girls, back in the kitchen barefoot and pregnant. It seems more about control and power of their everyday lives. And I point to Virginia, where evidently the Youngkin administration is advocating this idea that law enforcement should be able to check your daughter's menstrual cycles on their little apps. Now, again, as a parent, I don't know, and honestly, I don't. Caveat, I actually don't know if my daughters use these. It's not my business to know, but I've advocated for them to not. Maybe go old school with a calendar. We'll get you a paper calendar. Because what they're advocating for in Virginia, this is scary stuff, is to allow law enforcement to use these apps, the information off of these apps. And they've actually proposed a budget that would earmark and put money for prosecuting and imprisoning women and doctors who receive and perform abortions. I mean, this is invasive stuff. Now remember, these are the people who told us that they're the party of individual liberty, they're the party of small, less intrusive government, that they're the party of get out of our lives, except I guess if you're a teenage girl. This is the weird kind of moment that we're in. And what's amazing to me is there are still women who vote for this kind of stuff. Now, the argument is if we allow this kind of exemption, if we allow women to be able to use these apps to track their thing, it would be a slippery slope. It'd be a problematic standard and potentially lead to more of us not being able to track what women do. And my thought was, look, I guess I'm old because I still remember, the idea that we should have the right to privacy, in our persons and our papers. Am I the only one who still thinks this way? Now, I know. Technically, the phone is not paper. Because this is how conservatives think. If it's not enumerated, if the founding fathers didn't say that you have the right to privacy in your cell phones and your digital documents, it doesn't exist. This is the thinking, because this is what they tell me all the time. Well, that's not written exactly the way you said it was. No, because the founders would have had no idea of a woman's menstrual cycle, let alone an app that would be tracking it. But here we are. And this is, again, one of these moments, how can they get away with this? They can because, well, they're the party of smaller, less intrusive government. They're just not intruding on, well, you right now. And then, again, I come back to this moment of what is up and what is down. For instance, the whole Social Security fight. I'm still getting people saying, see, Rick, the Republicans never wanted to destroy Social Security. And I'm going, what? They've only been wanting to destroy Social Security since it was proposed. Paul Krugman had an interesting article where he walks through this. And he said, look, the reality is Republicans, have been trying to make deep cuts in Social Security every time they see that there's a political window to do it. Every time they see this chance, they jump at it. And then when people get outraged, when Granny goes, I'm getting my cane to beat you, they go, no, it's Democrats. Democrats are smearing us. Democrats are making us look bad. No, this is, as I said over the weekend on our podcast, this is one of those moments of how dare you hold me accountable for those things that I said. But this is where we are. And I keep coming back to that I think it was Maya Angelou who said, if someone tells you who they are, believe them. When do we believe them? Answer, probably never. Because, interestingly enough, most recent analysis of Congress. And this is one of those interesting things. It's one of those weird kind of those weird stories, because people say, well, the country's gotten much more extreme because of gerrymandering and because of the extremism and all this. Well, what this most recent study finds out is it's true. In Democratic districts that are gerrymandered or are safe, quote unquote, safe districts, the wants and needs of the people being heard in ways makes those representatives a little more willing to go out the extreme and start demanding things, like paid sick leave, like maternal leave, like health care for everyone, like child care for families so that, if both parents have to work, they can afford it. Those really hippie, liberal, socialist, commie things. And what they found on the other side, because you go, well, then, if it's true on the left, it's got to be true on the right. What they found is that the most gerrymandered districts weren't any more extreme than any of the other districts. They're finding the entire freaking Republican Party is off its rocker and has gone completely off the deep end. So it's not just, the districts that feel safe where people are feel emboldened to say, hey, there are things that we want and need, and this is our ideology. The entire Republican Party, and I go back to the reality is the Republican Party is bought and paid for. The moneyed interests own the Republican Party. I've asked for 18 years, show me a piece of legislation that a Republican has dreamt up, proposed, passed, and gotten signed. That sole purpose is to help working people. And in 18 years, nothing. Because there is nothing. Because after all, Republicans hate working people. Look at their policies. Whereas you look at some of the left, they're pushed maybe a little even more uncomfortable than I'm with, and may go, hey, obviously you're not into winning. But at least they're pushing ideas that are helping working families. The basic tenet of the Democratic Party right now is, how do we get a system where people can rise up, where a job does give people the ability to support themselves, support their families. The idea of bread, yes, but roses too. The idea that a job should be more than just basically making ends meet, that it should make lives better. But here again, we're in one of these moments where the megaphone keeps throwing out these messages that a lot of my working class friends have bought into because it's all they hear. And then feel defensive every time the Republicans flip on this switch to say, oh, see, look, they're coming for whatever. They're coming for your guns. There's no legislation to do that. They're coming for your stoves. There's no legislation to do that. Down the line, they're coming for your light bulbs. I still got light bulbs. I got light bulbs all around me. They're coming for your toilets. Yeah, I got one too. They got those too. But fear and smear seems to work. But when you start saying, hey, they're coming for your daughter's menstrual cycle, the right doesn't get upset at all. And I got to tell you, as a parent, I'd be losing my ever-loving flipping mind. So the question is when do we wake up from this collective malaise? When do we wake up from our silo thinking? When do we wake up and say, hey, you know what? Maybe we do need to, start working on those things that we can agree on? I don't know. Got lots to get to. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. Also, want to hear your thoughts, questions, comments. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
To maintain the strongest economy in the world, we need the best infrastructure in the world.
President Biden touts climate action and infrastructure upgrades in State of the Union address.
Law enforcement officials said their plan was to, quote, completely destroy the city.
FBI disrupts neo-Nazi plot to attack Baltimore's power grid. Plus,
Minnesota is not going to wait any longer. Minnesotans are not going to wait any longer.
Minnesota enacts ambitious law to go 100% carbon-free by 2020. 2040.
All of those ambitions and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
And my Republican friends who voted against it as well. I still get asked to fund the projects in those districts as well, but don't worry. I promised I'd be a president for all Americans. We'll fund these projects, and I'll see you at the groundbreaking.
Oh, snap. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, we have seen a lot of State of the Union addresses in our days, yes. But boy howdy, was that a thriller on Tuesday night.
Indeed, in his second State of the Union address on Tuesday night, President Joe Biden highlighted his major legislative accomplishments, including new laws helping veterans exposed to toxic burn pits and long-deferred infrastructure repairs and projects now getting underway under the bipartisan infrastructure law. Biden touted direct benefits to everyday Americans from that bill and the Democrats' landmark climate and infrastructure bill signed into law last year, the Inflation Reduction Act. Both laws have generated a surge of major infrastructure projects, domestic manufacturing projects, and thousands of new jobs, which Biden characterized as an investment in America's long-term resilience.
The Inflation Reduction Act is also the most significant investment ever in climate change. Ever. Lowering utility bills, creating American jobs, leading the world. We're rebuilding for the long term. New electric grids that are able to weather major storms and not prevent those forest fires. Roads and water systems withstand the next big flood. Clean energy to cut pollution and create jobs in communities often left behind.
Biden also chided congressional Republicans for opposing both bills, framing action on the climate crisis as a moral obligation.
Let's face reality. The climate crisis doesn't care if you're in a red or blue state. It's an existential threat. We have an obligation, not to ourselves, but to our children and grandchildren, to confront it. I'm proud of how America at last is stepping up to the challenge.
And I'm proud about the fact that after years and years of complaining that presidents were not even mentioning the climate in their State of the Union address, we now have a president who is touting some huge accomplishments in that regard.
Yep, and Biden also, by the way, called for higher taxes on the oil and gas industry, which hit all-time record profits in 2022, and he criticized the industry for keeping supplies tight and prices high, exacerbating inflation as Americans struggled to afford energy and food.
And in the middle of a war, something we used to call war profiteering.
Because of those record profits, British oil giant BP this week announced it is watering down its climate pledge to reduce emissions by 2030 while increasing its investments in oil and gas.
Who could have guessed it?
Big Oil's record profits in 2022 have renewed calls to repeal billions in permanent tax breaks and subsidies that are given to the oil industry every year.
How about we just repeal the oil industry?
In other news, the Federal Bureau of Investigation announced this week the arrests of 2 neo-Nazis who the agency says were plotting to shoot up multiple electric grid substations in Baltimore, Maryland, in a racially motivated attack that they hoped would cause widespread disruption and spark a race war. An FBI bulletin in November warned of threats by domestic violent extremist groups to attack critical infrastructure to, quote, create civil disorder and inspire further violence. Since 2016, white supremacist plots targeting energy systems have dramatically increased in frequency.
How targeting power grids somehow leads to a race war is kind of beyond me. Then again, I'm not a Nazi.
Finally, with Republicans holding the U.S. House majority, climate action is stalled in Congress for at least the next 2 years. But states are picking up the slack. In Minnesota, Democratic Governor Tim Walz signed into law one of the nation's most ambitious climate laws, requiring the state's electric utilities to reach 80% renewable generation by 2030 and fully 100% carbon-free electricity by 2040.
Nice. That's one. Just 49 other states to go. For much more on all of these reports and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks, Twitters, and Mastodons at Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So with all the questions going on in Ohio around the railroad industry, again, I keep coming back to the reality is what's going on there has everything to do with the fact that we've allowed them to monopolize. We've allowed them to be deregulated to the point to where they're supposed to be watching themselves, and we've given them so many waivers on the few regulations that are out there. It's almost like, why bother at this point? And the question is if we've given them this power and this control, isn't it time that we start, I don't know, looking at clawing some of that back? I know I've got friends who say we need to nationalize the rails. I got friends who say we should have let the railroad workers strike, all of this. And look, the rail industry is just a small part of the entire country as we've moved away from overseeing and holding corporate America accountable. That's why I've asked Tom Nelson to come talk with us. He's the Allegheny County executive and author of One Day Stronger, How One Union Local Saved a Mill and Changed an Industry and What It Means for Manufacturing. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that, or you can just go to his website, onedaystrongerbook.com. We'll get links out on social media. Tom, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be back on. I always enjoy my time with you guys.
So, I'm looking at the story coming out of East Palestine, Ohio, and I keep coming back to the fact that we've given so much power and so much control to these big corporations that we're never going to hold them accountable with today's framework. And I think it comes back to us.
I think that this is yet another reason why we need to do everything we can to strengthen the labor movement. I mean, we need to have some sort of weight that's going to counterbalance it, whether it comes to worker safety or whether it comes to community safety. Yeah, in Wisconsin, we had a derailment, must have been like 25, 26 years ago. And this has happened everywhere, and it can continue to happen. And I think this is also a case in point where, having strong unions that are able to counterbalance corporate powers, not something that's just good for the economy, good for those workers and those families, but also good for those communities. Because if a workplace is safe, then a community is safe. And that clearly was not the case there. And in the article that that came out in the Progressive, we talked a little bit about the challenges we're having here in Wisconsin. I know what we're going up against here is something that folks are dealing with all over the country.
No, Wisconsin, back in 2011, we were sleeping on the floor of the Capitol when Walker rammed through Act 10 and attacked labor unions, especially public sector workers. I remember at the time, coming back to Pennsylvania going, get ready. This is going to be the playbook that sweeps across the country, being told, no, don't worry about it. That's just Wisconsin. And and my mind goes to this place that, we've had such bad leadership for so long in a lot of these places. It's remarkable to me, but you talk to the average working person and they seem to get it. I mean, when we traveled through Wisconsin and talked to workers on both sides, Republican and Democrat, they want somebody who's going to fight for their jobs, who's going to fight for their ability to make a living and their family's ability to get ahead. That doesn't seem like uncharted territory, somewhere where Democrats should thrive.
Well, you have to realize, too, we have to remember that the first and foremost, the modern-day Democratic Party coming out of FDR is an economic coalition. And that's the reason why leftist center parties all over the free world, most of those political parties are called labor parties. And so Democratic Party has got to go back to its roots. And we know that when you have candidates that focus on that, and you mentioned, Rick, that when you're going around talking to union workers, they're both Democrats and Republicans. And for a lot of these private sector and trades, especially, there are more Republicans than Democrats. And so we have them in our fold. They're sitting right there. They're in the palm of our hand, and yet we are ignoring them. And yet we have this opportunity to engage them, to bring them in the fold, and we're not doing that. There was a study that was done about a year and a half ago called Factory Towns. And it was, I think, politically speaking, economically speaking, I think it's one of the most important studies that has been done. A lot of times we talk about how the suburbs have turned away from the Republican Party because of Donald Trump and that there have been Democratic gains. Yes, there has. But where the big loss is and where the big opportunity is in these small towns that are undergirded by a factory, whether it's a paper mill, a steel mill, you name it. Because here in Wisconsin, while there's been a shift to the tune of maybe plus 10,000 or 20,000 in the Democratic column, we have seen Democrats lose over 100,000 in these smaller communities. So, Rick, when you're going around Wisconsin, going around the country, the communities that you probably spent the most amount of time were those small towns, medium-sized town, factory towns. And not only do we need to pay more attention to these folks because that is who the Democratic Party is. It's a progressive county that's big. It's a progressive party that is grounded in an economic coalition. But politically speaking, that is the key for a long-run, sustainable, progressive coalition that wins elections. And then votes and works for and leads for working families.
So how do you get that message out? Because look, the sad reality is that's the Democratic Party that I'm a part of. But it's been painted as the Democrats are these extreme leftists who are on these cultural issues and all of this extreme things that some of those working people aren't on board with. How do you balance those different worlds?
Well, I think before we start messaging, and we always talk about messaging, I think there has to be some substance. There has to be some policy. And I believe that the only way that you're going to make substantial inroads in these communities is with transformative change, whether it comes in the healthcare system, whether it comes in trade policy, economic policy, tax policy, you name it. I think ARPA funding, the COVID money, those have been very effective in bringing these communities that were, staring down the abyss and coming back after the pandemic. But if you really want to win hearts and minds of these factory towns, these small and medium-sized communities, we have to start speaking the economic language. We also have to look at long trends. Going back to, Rick, you're talking about corporate power that's run amok. Well, one thing we have let go is antitrust laws, and we've allowed these monopolies in every single industry. I mean, wherever you go, everything from tractors to, to bacon to food stuff, all of that is pretty much concentrated in the hands of 2 or 3 companies. And 2 years ago, during the pandemic, and we saw the price of bacon just go through the roof, and people are thinking, oh, it has to be for the Democrats who are spending. The Democratic policies have shut down the economy. No, it's because we've allowed corporate power, both Democrats and Republicans. We have allowed consolidation, in that example, in the pork industry, so there's only a couple of suppliers. So if you have a pandemic and you choke off a couple of supply points, boom, the entire market craters. So we have to talk about, busting up these monopolies. And of course, that's going to redound to the benefit, not just in urban centers, but in these rural communities. You go down, downtown Lodi or Marinette or all these communities that once had a thriving downtown because you've had consolidation in agriculture, big ag. You've had consolidation in the banking sector. You've had consolidation in retail. You only have maybe one branch office of like PNC Bank or something like this. You don't have the local small town banks anymore. And instead of having a thriving downtown, you got a Walmart on the edge of town. So what Democrats have to do is we have to go in and we need wholesale constructive, change in the economy. And I think once we start not nibbling around the edges, but once we have a real impact on antitrust, monopolies, tax policy, trade policy, once we start doing that, then I think we can really start making inroads, and then we can start talking about messaging. But right now, you have 2 tracks. One, we have everything we can to make that kind of transformative change. At the same time, you're right, Rick, we have to work on messaging because it's just not good enough.
No, and in your piece, it's time to railroad the oligarchs over at the Progressive magazine, and we'll get links out on social media how you can check out Tom's most recent piece over there. You talk about the sick day issue with the railroads, and I said it was a huge mistake for Biden to not use that moment. And the bully pulpit that came with it to call for sick days for everyone. I knew from the beginning there was never going to be a strike allowed. They weren't going to allow that to happen and stop whatever economic gains we were having. But there could have been a moment where they spun this and they're going, look, these workers should have sick days, but so should everybody else. This could have been that moment of going, this is a national call for everyone, not just these handful of workers here, but everyone. And they missed that opportunity.
That's right. That's right. We have to realize too that the railroad industry is not nationalized. These were all companies whose profits depend on the blood, sweat, and tears of workers. And so if the workers were going to strike, I think that would be very bad for their business model. So you're right. We had these companies, we had them in the vice grip, and we could have gotten something more from them, but we didn't. And I make mention of that because you only have so many of these opportunities where you can go in and not just do the right thing. You mentioned messaging. I mean, how can you message a policy if you have this opportunity and you don't take advantage of it? Here you have, and my guess is railroad unions are like private sector unions here in Wisconsin or the trades. There's probably more Republicans than Democrats. And so you had the Democrats and the Republicans there, and we had an opportunity to show those Republican railroad workers that the Democratic Party is on your side, not the side the boss is. And whose side did we fall down? It was another missed opportunity. And we only have so many of these opportunities. We have to take advantage of it. And every opportunity that we let go is one more thing that makes our messaging that much more difficult because we lose credibility.
No, that's exactly right. Every time I bring up the fact that Biden is moving something that's helping workers, well, he didn't help those railroad workers. Well, they don't want those railroad workers helped either. But it's the talking point. It's what they throw up in your face, and sadly, it's hard to put that down. Now, I do know that they're still negotiating. I do know probably by the end of this year that they're going to get a handful of sick days, not the 15 that they wanted, but I'm told by my friends in the different unions that they're going to get 3 or 4. That's going to happen, but that's still not where we think they should be. At least that's where my thought is.
Yeah, and what we're looking at here, I mean, to take an example here in Wisconsin, we have Local 578. I know that when you did your tour, you stopped by Local 578 in Oshkosh. So the workers there at that facility, Oshkosh Defense, they were owed the contract that Oshkosh Corporation got from the federal government to build the next generation of postal vehicles. So based on the track record, the work ethic, the production that the union workers in Oshkosh did, they got the contract, but then they sent the contract down to non-union South Carolina. So here is, again, just like with the railroad strike looming, Democrats had an opportunity to get out in front of this and do something, anything, to show those hard hats inside Oshkosh truck, most of which have Trump stickers on, Republican stickers. This was an opportunity for people like Tim Jacobson, the lead steward, to go in there and say, you know what, there's a reason why we endorse Democrats. There's a reason why Bernie Sanders came to our union hall, because Democrats stand up for this. But it's been crickets. There's been little to no support. The only major national voice that's got behind these workers is AOC. Because on a committee back when Democrats were in charge, they brought some of the postal workers up and basically called them carpet. Look at what you're allowing happen. This is union busting, plain and simple. And she was the only one who spoke up for those workers. Yeah. If we are going to be able to message, if we are going to be the party of working families, we cannot lose these opportunities, and we need more people than just Tom Nelson, AOC champion those workers.
No, I'm right
There's
there with you.
Another example.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Tom Nelson. He's the Outagamie executive, running for re-election, I understand, right?
Yes, sir. So this would be my 4th term. I am the last progressive who represents a red county in Wisconsin. So naturally, I've got some opposition, got some competition. People are thinking after the Senate run that I'm vulnerable. So I've got some money, got some resources coming in after me. So we've been working really hard, knocking on doors. We have attached my campaign to whoever the progressive comes out of the Supreme Court race. And then I'm going to do everything, not just for my campaign, but to add votes and to help the top, the ticket, the Supreme Court. Because if Wisconsin can flip this open conservative seat on our court, it changes everything. It makes Wisconsin, puts us on track to be a blue state, and puts us on track to make sure that Joe Biden is reelected. Because with a court that respects the rule of law, that's not going to go ahead and rubber stamp gerrymandered districts, voter suppression laws, we can reverse all of that. And in the state that, you win statewide elections by 20,000 votes, 23,000 votes, if you were to improve, if you were to get rid of those voter suppression laws, you go from winning 20,000 votes to 60,000 votes, or instead of losing by 20,000 votes, winning by 20,000 votes. So that is what is at stake. The spring election here, the Hill, Politico, you name it, have called Wisconsin Supreme Court race one of the most, if not the most important race in 2023 in the entire country.
Yeah. And your race too. If you want to check out Tom Nelson's website, nelsonforcountyexecutive.com, we'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. I did want to get your thoughts before I let you go on the most recent story that Oshkosh lost an enormous contract, something like $8.6 billion contract. Yeah. What is that going to mean for those workers in Oshkosh?
This is at the doorstep of the C-suite of that corporation. What they tried doing, try being penny wise, pound foolish. They thought, okay, we can take this contract, make some more money, because we can send down to South Carolina where people are willing not to be part of the union and willing not to earn as much money. And so what happens is, rightfully, there is a controversy, because that contract should not have gone to South Carolina, should have stayed in Oshkosh. Well, so now you have another contract for which Oshkosh is up for. Do you think the federal government really wants to have controversy surrounding another contract? No. So Oshkosh shot themselves in the foot 2 years ago when they tried being cute, and it generated all this controversy, and it hurt their chances. They did it to themselves, hurt their chances to get more contracts. And once again, who suffers? The workers. Because another reason why people like Tim Jacobson and Bob Link fought really hard for that contract is because their generation, and there were so many workers there, that they needed this contract, and then they could lock in their retirement. They lost that contract. Now they're losing this contract. So you talk about how there is a labor market where there's all kinds of jobs available. The reason why this doesn't translate to average working families is because it doesn't translate into good paying union jobs, and because it means working for a corporation like Oshkosh that allows these billion-dollar contracts, multi-year billion-dollar contracts, go someplace else. Shame on them.
Yeah, shame on them. I saw that, and I go, you know how this is going to go. Those workers in Wisconsin are going to get screwed, and they're going to just keep moving stuff to South Carolina, where corporate America can profit more, and the workers, again, get the short end of the stick. Tom, I appreciate the thoughts. Great article. I hope folks will take a look at it. It's time to railroad the oligarchs over at the Progressive Magazine. We'll get links out on social media. Also, check out Tom's book, One Day Stronger. You can get that at onedaystrongerbook.com. We'll get links out on that as well. But, Tom, appreciate the time, man.
Good to be back on. Thanks, Rick.
Good stuff. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. I want to hear your thoughts, questions, comments, anything on your mind. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
If
you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Evidently, Florida is considering, and this is one of those, again, you gotta love Florida. Evidently, Florida is considering ending their offering of AP classes. Let that sink in for a second. The tens of thousands of high school students in Florida that take these advanced placement courses so they can have, you know, a competitive edge in college and all that stuff. DeSantis says he wants to reevaluate the state's relationship with the private company that administers those courses and SAT exams. Yeah, there is that. Because again, you know, this is one of those things that the right does masterfully. When they get their hooks into something, it's about the punishment. It's about playing the victim and then the punishment. And this is all over the fact that there's an AP course on African-American history, which I think there should be. I think there should be a course on African-American history. Because I got to tell you, when we did our tour back in 2015, and we went to all the places that now have museums and centers and institutes and all kinds of stuff, learned a ton of stuff that I didn't know. I knew we'd always treated black people poorly. I knew that. Knew we treated them horribly. Heard the stories of, you know, the big stories. But wow. I mean, really, wow. When you go into some of these places and you actually learn about the history. Now, did I feel bad? Yeah, I felt horrible. Was I responsible? No, it wasn't me doing it. But this is one of those moments where in those spaces, in that moment, you've got to then go, yeah, look what Grandpappy did. Look what that generation, you've got to own that at some point. So having that bit of history, I think, is important. And if people wanted to take an AP course in that, it should be offered. Now, again, you know, the right-wing message is it would make people feel bad. I'm not buying. Not buying at all. Interesting bit of information I want to throw out there. Evidently today, top-level advisory came from the U.S. government to American citizens in Russia. And I can't believe that they have to do this. But evidently there's a level 4 warning that if you're visiting Russia, if you're going to Russia, if you're in Russia, maybe don't. The warning marks the highest level, they say, level 4 of alerts issued by the State Department, which ranges from exercising precaution to seizing all travel. This is don't do it. Now, here's the thing. The war in Ukraine, the Russians invading Ukraine, almost a year ago. If you haven't gotten the message to gather the sheep and get the flock out by now, I don't know what's in that for you. I got questions. But the U.S. government is saying, hey, maybe you should, I don't know, maybe you should consider somewhere else. And I agree. Quick break, right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. What labor union would you say has the coolest name? The Sons of Vulcan would most certainly have to be in the running. And on this day in labor history, the year was 1865. That was the day the Sons of Vulcan ended their 8-month strike and won a union contract. The Vulcans were skilled steelworkers. Many were immigrants from England, Scotland, and Wales. They worked at puddling, the process by which carbon was burnt off of molten iron in order to form steel. It was tough work that required physical strength, skill, and experience. The Vulcans first formed in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1858. A skilled trade union, only puddlers were eligible to join. They called their locals forges. They took their name, Vulcan, from the Roman god of fire and volcanoes. With the ongoing Civil War, the demand for steel grew. The work of the Vulcans was vital to the Union's war effort. But as the Civil War drew to a close, puddlers' wages were threatened. The Vulcans declared a national strike. The strike wore on for 8 months. Finally, the industry leaders agreed to the workers' demands. The Vulcans won wage increases tied to industry profits as well as union recognition. With this victory, the Vulcans' membership grew. By 1873, the number of Vulcans had topped 3,000 members. Unfortunately, that year saw a major economic panic sweep across the United States. The economic crisis took a toll on union membership. Another downfall of the union was their policy not to admit black members. This meant that employers could hire black labor in an effort to undermine the union. By 1876, the Vulcans had merged with other steel unions to form the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Please be my Valentine. That is not only a warm, sweet, sometimes romantic sentiment people express in mid-February on frilly red cards. It's also the name of a 3rd century saint who literally lost his head, a 9th century pope whose reign lasted only 40 days, 3 Roman emperors, a very good Mexican hot sauce, and a tiny town in Texas. That town has a genuinely sweet story to tell and a unique role to play in the sending of thousands of Valentine's Day sentiments to people around the world. Valentine, Texas, population 217, was founded by the Southern Pacific Railroad in the 1880s and reportedly was named for one of the corporation's big shareholders. Nothing romantic about that. But in recent years, would-be Cupids have turned the town's name and, believe it or not, its one-room post office into a center of affectionate expression. What happened is that romantics from distant places began to batch up their pre-addressed stamped valentines and zip them to this postal outpost way out on the Texas-Mexico border. Why? Because to give their sentimental missives extra oomph, they wanted them to bear the special touch of being mailed from an actual place named Valentine. The greatest thing about our public postal workers is that they literally deliver, and the Valentine branch goes the extra mile to provide this loving gesture at no extra charge. Ismelda Ornelas, postmaster of the 79854 office, hand stamps each envelope herself. Indeed, the Valentine Post Office is now officially designated the Love Station. Moreover, the local school district holds an annual art contest among students to design each year's Valentine postmark, which is then stamped on each envelope. This is Jim Hightower saying, see, while the media tells us our world is going to hell, here's another grassroots example of loving, creative people going the other way. Happy Valentine's Day.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So there is another explanation for the classified documents by Trump. And I thought we'd had all of them. I thought we'd had they were pretty. I liked them. They were good souvenirs. And they were evidently empty. This is, it seems like maybe instead of, staying up nights, tweeting nonsense, he's now dreaming up reasons for having classified folders. The latest one is evidently a lawyer for Trump has put forth this idea that he was just using it as a block for a nightlight, a light on his nightstand. Evidently, there was an old style dial phone that had one of those landline phones, had a blue light on it, would keep him awake at night. So he used the folder, the classified documents folder, to block the light. So crazy. Yeah, who knows? So crazy. I gotta tell you. I think I believe it. I'm shock of all shocks. I'm actually gonna believe this. Here to share some thoughts on the craziness of the day and the top stories. Our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you.
So you buy in the it was just the blue light. We were just shielding the blue light because he couldn't sleep at night.
Well, I believe anything anymore. Not that I believe what they say. I just believe anything. That you're going to hear anything.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It is just crazy. Most recent Politico Morning Consult poll out: 54% of voters say not happy when the people heckled the president. I would have thought it'd been higher.
Well, I would have. I was the next day. I had a couple of teachers have some students contact me to ask me, one, my opinion of it, and two, what happened during the time I was in Congress, and three, did I think there was a way for this to stop? And I guess I would want to think more people didn't like it, but I guess this is a sign of the times because you got to get back at this and you got to get back at that. But I did tell them maybe my brain's getting older, but in general, yeah, you might hear a couple of moans or people don't applaud, but during my time there, I really don't recall outrageous outbursts and screaming out. I just don't recall it. Maybe I'm forgetful. It wasn't anything to the level of what happens today.
Yeah, no,
and I don't know why it's done. And then the other question that the teachers asked was, can this stop? Well, I don't know. What is it? Stupid is stupid, and I guess you can't stop it.
Stupid is as stupid does.
And there's been, Republicans more. It's happened both sides, a few things that shouldn't, but I think the screaming out of the liar is, one of the worst parts of it. And I don't know. I was disappointed. I just don't recall it being that bad when I was there.
I had to get your thoughts on this story. The Washington Post over the weekend came out with a story on Jared and Saudi Arabia. And you've been talking about this from, the beginning, the fact that when they left the White House, Jared got a nice, big couple $1 billion, a little bit of money to run his next venture with. And I don't think it got enough scrutiny. This LIV golf tournament, I don't think is getting enough scrutiny, but I wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Well, I think if you look at what happened with Trump and Mohammed bin Salman, if in fact the White House, and Trump was president, had come down hard on Mohammed bin Salman, he was on the edge. I'm not saying on the edge of stepping down as the crown prince at the time, because, now he's technically prime minister. He's actually not the king, because the king has dementia, Alzheimer's. But had Trump weighed in when the rest of the world did on the Khashoggi murder, then Mohammed bin Salman, again, may have not stepped down, but he wouldn't have had the cushion that he had. Once the most powerful country on earth weighed in on it, that was it. I believe I'm correct in saying that Jared Kushner at one point in time was making 85 phone calls a month to Mohammed bin Salman. Most people don't make 85 phone calls a month to their wife.
Yeah.
And he did.
Because she won't answer the phone.
Right. And, now in April of 2022, the New York Times reported Kushner received $2.5 billion in Saudi-backed funds. Also, there was a report issued by, some of the top consultants that the kingdom was given that said, don't make investments like this. And then, according to the Post, of course, there was a report revealing how Kushner's company concealed the source of the funds. And then on an SEC form, a box reading sovereign wealth funds and foreign official institutions was left blank. Now, I don't know how. I mean, look, I did a bad boo-boo, and I went to prison, and blah, blah, blah. I understand all that. I don't know how you get away with doing these things.
Well, what's that saying about people who kill people? You know, you kill one person, you go to jail. You kill 20, you go to a mental hospital, and they observe you. You kill 1 million, and wow, you're remembered in history.
True.
Maybe your crime wasn't big enough.
Right. Yeah, maybe I should have, I don't know, done something worse. But I'm looking at this. He secured $2.5 billion in funds for the company of Affinity Partners. Of course, I said a long time ago, before Kushner left the White House, that there was going to be definite collusion, definite involvement, definite business interest, because Kushner did any single thing that the Saudis wanted. And remember something else too here, Rick. You know, the Iran nuclear deal was rolling back the centrifuges. Yes, I understand there were some messy parts to the deal. I understand some ballistic missiles weren't included, but the main centrifuges were rolled back under the nuclear deal. Secretary of State, the first one for Trump, said, keep it. Trump did. Bolton comes in. The next thing you know, Kushner has this cushy relationship with Saudi Arabia. And the main people who wanted that Iran nuclear deal dead were the Saudis.
Yep. And
it died. Now, I think Bolton was the front cover guy. Yeah, he wouldn't like it. But I think Kushner was the inside guy that didn't want that to remain either. And that was at the bidding of the Saudis. So I guess I'll throw this out here. If you did all these things for them, if I did all these things for them, I would expect they're probably going to turn around and do all kinds of things for us. And that's what's happened here. It's logical.
No, it's the quid pro quo. So where are the folks who are going to do the investigations into this? And also, I understand, according to the Washington Post, that the Saudi real estate company it plans to build, as part of their $4 billion resort, a Trump hotel. So again, it seems there's a lot of this kind of, I don't know, shady kind of hand holding. And then you look at the money that's in this golf tournament, this enormous amount of money. It seems like a lot of quid pro quo.
Oh, we have government agencies, we have SEC, we have Department of Justice that looks into these things. And like any of this, there's a couple of arenas here. One, was there a tit for tat that was done, or two, and this is what happened in my case, was there influence peddling? In other words, a stream of things of value that happened due to a relationship. All right? So you have to look at this. Were there a stream of things that occurred as a result of the relationship? I think we can answer that. Somebody in the legal realm is going to have to answer it.
Yeah. Now, what we see from Republicans so far out of the box as they control the House, we've now got this House Committee on Weaponization, evidently a subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government. They've had their first hearing or so, not on Jared, not on these shady dealings. But I guess Twitter, Hunter Biden's laptop, I guess this is what we're going to get? This is the focus?
Well, I think it's going to be the thing about the Hunter Biden deal, I'm not sure, though. Discovery is an ugly thing. We could look at this two ways, because the lawyers are going to come back to Hunter Biden's lawyers. They're going to want discovery. We want to know this, where's that, where's
right.
These emails. Well, somebody would normally say, which I was questioning today, do you really want that discovery? But then again, if they have the laptop and they have everything on the laptop, then why would you be afraid of discovery? You can look at it that way, too.
Right.
So it's kind of a pushback by Biden's lawyers. And, of course, they have the right to discovery, too. And for those people not familiar with it, that means that Hunter Biden's lawyers can ask people that are on the opposite side of this legal issue that they want discovery of, who did what. Were there consultants hired to deal with Hunter Biden? There's a lot of discovery that could be also embarrassing for the Republican side.
No, I think look, if it's all going to go bad anyway, if you're Hunter Biden, I don't know that there's a downside to this.
That's what I say. If they do have the laptop and anything on there is probably what I'll call automatic discovery.
Yeah. Now, the other part of this, there's another part of the whole discovery process. I talked about this last week. Did you see the Brett Favre story?
No.
Brett Favre is suing Shannon Sharp, Pat McAfee, and the auditor of Mississippi for defamation for the speeches that he didn't give and took $1 million for, and the lobbying he did for the volleyball facility for his daughter's volleyball team at the University of Southern Mississippi. That all came out of TANF funds. And
Really?
he's evidently he claims this is defamation by saying what I just said. Evidently this is bad, and so he's going to go after and sue ESPN, I guess, or Sharp and McAfee because of their show. And I said that too. Discovery is going to be very interesting, Brett, because we'll see what other skeletons are in the closet.
Right. So McAfee, who's now a talk show host, would be the one that they would have to. Why would there be discovery on both sides? But that's interesting.
Yeah,
and if he doesn't seem worried about it, then that makes it even more interesting.
No, it's interesting because again, the one thing I love about the legal system is that whole discovery phase. And
correct.
Hopefully we will see. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Bob Ney, former Ohio Congressman, political analyst, talking about the top stories of the day. Wanted to get your thoughts on the balloons. More balloons. Evidently, China is saying that we have flown at least 10 balloons over China this year, or since the beginning of 2022. So over the last 14 months, they claim 10 of our balloons have been illegally flown over China. So the question is, are they going to start shooting them down, and do we still use balloons?
We could have flown balloons. Like Judge Judy says, come into court with clean hands. Okay, everybody spies. Okay, everybody. And if we don't spy on our people, by the way, we have other countries spy on our people. And those other countries have us spy for them. So it's a spy world. We might have balloons. I doubt that we had 10 of them, over there. You know how celebrity deaths come in threes, and all of a sudden you see the story of the balloons, and they came in a third and then a fourth.
Right.
There's probably more. And this has probably gone on here and there, and nobody, said anything about it. Somebody shot it down. Nobody, said a word. I fully expected China to come out, whether it's true or not, and say that we had balloons. And it's like, okay, I'm actually kind of glad we put balloons over there. If they're putting them here, put them over there.
Yeah.
See what they do.
No,
okay?
Again, this is that Cold War ramp up where we better get ready for it because we better thicken up the spine a little bit and stop with the clutching our pearls.
Yeah, I think we ought to put a balloon over and put G's face on it and draw a mustache or something and let it float around.
Until they shoot it down. There's the Bob.
Then they won't shoot it down. Or better, put Kim Jong-un's face on it.
Put one of those big happy smiley faces. There you go. But again, this is another one of those moments where the right is losing their minds. Everything I see now is about how we're weak for not knowing these balloons are in the air. And you go, I seem to remember this stuff when I was a kid happening a lot. I don't know that it's a weakness not to shoot everything that flies over. I'm just, am I wrong here?
We're shooting things we don't even know what we're shooting, which becomes a problem. Well, a very interesting problem. Now we're into the political panic mode too. But there it is, shoot it down. Now wait till we accidentally shoot down something we shouldn't shoot down.
Yeah.
But there is a certain amount of panic over this, and it's like, okay, China floated a balloon, we shot it down. Another one came over Canada. We don't know what it was. We shot it and 3 others down. They're shooting ours down. Okay. If something else comes, shoot it down. And, I'm tired of hearing the word balloon. I don't know about you. Now, of course, now the government threw it out there.
UFO.
Not a UFO, but an object that wasn't identified has now become an alien ship.
Yeah, I know. I'm waiting for I'm waiting for the mothership to come and attack. This is where my mind is now going. It's not really about balloons. It's about something else.
Well,
they're preparing us.
I'm waiting for one to be shot, and all of a sudden you see a faint thing, and somebody records it, and it says, "It's a boy," or "It's a girl." Then they'll stop.
Yes, that. Absolutely that.
Right.
Oh, see, now how do I transition out of this?
I don't know, but I thought it was a good one. I made that up myself.
That's now. How do I transition to where I was planning to go next?
Oh, I can transition out.
All right, here we go.
It won't sell well with the Chinese because they'll think that we're maybe making fun of their child limitation policy.
Oh.
Then we're really in trouble.
Yeah, now we're really in trouble. Finally, I wanted to get your thoughts on the rail derailment in eastern Ohio. I know that's your backyard.
Right.
Interestingly enough, the Congressman Bill Johnson finally has come out and said something after Lauren Boebert complained that Buttigieg didn't mention it, and it's now in the right wing anger center. But he's finally come out. He's now doing the Fox stuff, so he's gonna get a little bit of attention. Any thoughts on the derailment at this point, and how badly it's been reported on, and the fact that we don't know much more than we knew when it happened?
Now who's Congressman Johnson?
He's the congressman for that district. It's his backyard. If a train derailed in your district, would you not have been on the ball that minute?
Well, that's why I said I barely have heard his name ever, and he's got the old district I had.
Oh, okay. Well,
I was being sarcastic here.
Oh, I missed that.
His name finally gets out there for something besides the post office. Okay, so, but yeah, he finally did say something. It was a derailment, major derailment. They've got to find out, about the derailment because it leaked all kinds of things. Potentially they had to evacuate, and things like that. And then there's the whole controversy of the reporter, which is another whole story that was handcuffed during the press conference. But yeah, I mean, I would, that. Now Salem itself up there in East Palestine wasn't mine, but I was right below it. Jim Traficant had Columbiana County, and I was right below with Jefferson County. But yes, I would have came out with a statement, even just something pertaining because it was the region that we're from. Sure, I would have. Absolutely.
Yeah, but here he is. He's finally come out because there's outrage. There's moral outrage. That enough has not been done. And you listen to the Boeberts of the world, they blew up the trains. I had a bunch of people, why'd they blow it up? I go, well, they didn't blow it up. There was explosions to relieve the pressure because they thought it would blow up, which would have been much worse. But at least this is all we're being told. Where's all this stuff going? How bad's it going to be for us? What are you doing to protect the people in those areas? How are we trying to make those folks, whole? Are we trying to make them able to weather what I think is going to be, one of the biggest ecological disasters, at least in the last couple of decades?
Right. It is. And they've got to do everything they can do, for the public safety, but also to monitor what the effects are going to be in the people that were removed in the area and the toxic chemicals.
Yeah. Now the mayor of that area, I got a kick out of. The mayor, he came out and said that Trent Conaway is his name, of East Palestine, Ohio. He said, this isn't going to get swept under the rug. I'm not going to be the country bumpkin that gets talked over by a big corporation. We're going to hold their feet to the fire. And they're going to do what they said they're going to do, and they're going to protect the people of this town. And my response is no, they're not, because they never do.
Right. Especially dealing, railroad management is tough.
Yep.
Very tough.
Well, we'll see. But, Bob, I appreciate the time. Thanks for the thoughts. As always, great stuff. Look forward to having you back again.
Thank you.
Good stuff. No, I mean, the reality is sorry, Trent. They're not going to. Back after this. bank-approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So, East Palestine, I'm told. Not Palestine. Or Palestine, not Palestine. I was corrected. Someone said, no, you're wrong. The area, because of where it is, can't be like, like Palestine, like the Palestinians. No, it's Palestine. And that was the correction. And someone most certainly say, you got to know the area. That's what it is. I'm like, okay. If that's what it is. Now, again, I come back to what Trent Conaway, the mayor, said, we're not going to be the country bumpkin that gets steamrolled. I got to tell you, I think they are, because we allow corporate America to get away with this. And the fact that I go back to where I started at, the reality, this is corporate America doing what they do. This train derailment, you had, over the last couple of decades, massive cuts in employment. Massive cuts in inspection times. As one guy told me, that they used to get 3 minutes to inspect. Now it's down to 90 seconds. Something like 120 points of inspection you've got to go over in 90 seconds. I'm going, I can't even read 120 words in 90 seconds. How are you going to look at and inspect things in that? And it's all because they've slashed all of this employment. It's all because it's about the profit. It's about the money. It's about lining their pockets. And, my concern is that, like any of this stuff, it's that swinging door between the regulators and the industry. And we've allowed this to happen in industry after industry, whereas Congress still hasn't acted on this. It's the same thing with being a Congress member and then going into lobbying the next year. There's got to be a buffer time where you're out of it for a while before you can go back in and start turning, twisting arms and that kind of stuff. Same thing with the regulators. Today I can be, regulating an industry, and tomorrow I can be working for it, and the day after I can go back to regulating it again. What sense does that make? Seems like there'd be a cozy relationship where the person who's going to pay you the most may actually have some, I don't know, some leverage you might think about. Just kind of a thought. Yeah, it is a weird time that we're in. Most certainly a weird time. And, I go back to when I was a kid, and I still remember the cabooses. And I remember that there were like 4 or 5 people on those cabooses back then. There were like, if I remember, like 10, 12 people on a train that was half the size of the ones we see now. Someone told me, train 5 miles long. Can you imagine doing a pre-trip on a train 5 miles long and having to walk around that whole thing in the dark? Yeah, not going to happen. We need this again. Will our Republican friends in the House, will they step forward and go, hey, we're going to investigate this, and hey, we're going to fix problems? No, because their ideology is destroy regulations, destroy oversight, and let corporate America do whatever the hell they want. This, another example of that. And again, we've been talking about this for years. None of it is new. None of this is new. This is who they are, what they do. And at some point, I'm hoping, by railing on about this time and time again, that we as working people wake up to the reality that, it's not job-killing regulations that our Republican friends love to scream about. It's the lack of regulation, the lack of oversight, the lack of preventative maintenance, the lack of inspection, the lack of holding people accountable that create these kind of situations. So are we surprised when it happens? Sadly, no. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. You got any questions, comments? Make sure you email me. Also, if you miss any portion of the program, grab the podcast. Wherever you get your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.